If you've played Smackdown vs. Raw 2009 before, there are probably a few things that stand out to you about this game. 1. The not so groundbreaking new tag team mechanics. 2. The removal of one of the best game modes ever, General Manager mode. And 3. The fact that this roster has 0 legends featured as playable characters. Anytime you talk about the roster in this game, it's hard not to mention the absence of your favorites from your childhood like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and so many more. The decision to scrap the Legends roster in this game for the first and only time in this series came as the WWE opted into a cash grab known as Legends of WrestleMania, a game that is neither an arcade nor a simulation game, stuck between the two as it never found a true identity. This game needed help overcoming this giant hole.
That's what she said!
Despite sporting a roster of 64 total unlockable characters, the character selection still felt bare at times. I'm here to speculate on a few names that could have potentially alleviated this limping roster and maybe would have made the character selection feel a bit more fulfilling. Released on November 9th, 2008, this game had a lot of eyes on it as it followed an underwhelming predecessor in this heavyweight series, and while there were certainly some positives it brought like the introduction of the Road to WrestleMania mode and finally including Paul London and Brian Kendrick from their days as a tag team, this game did not deliver in all of the ways fans had hoped. As always, it's important to note that many of the superstars mentioned here made their impact in the WWE after the cutoff point the developers could include them, so even if they would have been justified additions, there's nothing developers could do as it takes time and resources to implement anybody into the game. Let's get into it. Number 1. R-Truth. Formerly known as K-Quick, R-Truth returned to the WWE in August of 2008 defeating Kenny Dykstra. This was his second run with the company, though the company ignored his previous stint in the WWE from 1999 to 2001. R-Truth wasted little time returning to relevancy, as he not only became a voting option for a United States title match at Cyber Sunday, but he actually won 59% of the fan vote despite only being back on the roster for a couple months at this time.
My man!
While the match did not end in victory for him, he was quickly established as an endearing talent to the fans. At the time of the game's release, Truth was even in a rivalry with Shelton Benjamin revolving around the United States title. Even though he did not capture the title during this chase, he would eventually become US champion later on down the line. If you know anything about the WWE in the past 15 years, you will know just how much of a gem R-Truth really is. Truth made his return to the WWE video games in Smackdown vs. Raw 2010, and since then, he hasn't looked back as he has been featured in every major WWE game from then up to the time of this recording. Smackdown vs. Raw 2009 wasn't just missing the legends, it was also missing the 2008 Slammy Award winner for the best musical performance, R-Truth. Number 2. Jack Swagger. The All-American American burst upon the scene, debuting on ECW in September 2008, just a month before the game's release. The amateur grappler quickly found himself feuding with the heart and soul of ECW, Tommy Dreamer. While Jack Swagger came in far too late to even be considered making it into the game, he did come in with a look that was unique to anyone else on the roster at this time, and he would ultimately finish the year undefeated in singles competition, and this streak would extend to February of 2009. In mid-January, Swagger became the ECW champion after defeating Matt Hardy, and the young star would then be heavily pushed, featuring as the face of the repackaged ECW brand for a short time. That is, until Christian made his WWE return in the spring of 2009. The future world champion Jack Swagger was priming himself for a surefire appearance in the next year's game, and the integration of DLC really allowed a lot of guys who were missed on the initial roster to make their appearance in the game. So maybe instead of initial inclusion on release, our hypothetical pleas are going towards the request of giving the Smackdown vs. Raw 2009 DLC some swagger. While he may not have had the tools to properly take advantage of the massive push that was coming to him, having him in the game would have added another element to the roster, and the same could be said for the next entrant, who would form a team with Swagger later in their careers. Number 3. Dolph Ziggler. Another perfect candidate for a DLC inclusion. The former Spirit Squad member was repackaged as Dolph Ziggler and made his first appearance on the main roster, September 15th, 2008. However, his in-ring debut under the new persona would be delayed after a 30-day suspension was handed down after violating the WWE's wellness program policy. Ziggler competed in dark matches and house shows throughout 2008, but his televised in-ring action would begin in early December in a losing effort to Batista. Ziggler was definitely a fresh face, but he also had a sense of familiarity as many fans recognized him as Nicky from the Spirit Squad. Ziggler was a smooth worker with a knack for making literally anybody he wrestled against look good, and would go on to have an extremely stable career, but he only wrestled in 4 televised matches in 2008, so it would be hard for even I to try to justify why he would get included into the game upon release. But I do genuinely believe Ziggler would have been a feasible option for a DLC inclusion, given the fact that he found himself constantly featured in the mid-card title picture in early to mid 2009. Now I know missing the legends is a big deal. It's strange to say, but after deeper inspection, the roster in this game really doesn't have too many holes as far as active wrestlers go. Looking back at 2008, just about any notable competitor that had actually been a part of something meaningful got included in this game. Well, except for the guys on this list, that is. If anything, I'd say the overall picture of talent in the WWE was just generally lesser than what we had come to expect given the star-studded rosters we were spoiled with in the years leading up. I mean, this game had all of the active champions included at the time of release. What are your thoughts about this game? I'd love to hear what you think. Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you want to see more. Number 4. Jamie Noble. Jamie Noble is an interesting one. Despite the fact that he had been with WWE during this run since 2005 and spent another 2 years on WWE television from 02 to 04, Noble never made an appearance in any of the Smackdown vs. Raw games. The exclusion of the Trailer Park Pit Bull is rather unfortunate at this particular time because Jamie Noble was making constant appearances on TV throughout 2008, despite most of them being losing efforts. He was a constant presence at live events and also had a rivalry with Chuck Palumbo involving Michelle McCool. In 2008, the supplemental brand landed Noble on Raw, where his trouble with the ladies would continue as he would form another love triangle, this time between Layla and William Regal. Following this storyline, Jamie Noble would almost exclusively work as an enhancement talent. While this may not have been the peak of his career, if this game was going to exclude the inactive legends, developers really should have doubled down and ensured that all of the active performers got included. This man was a solid worker, who was willing to carry out humiliating acts and take part in bizarre storylines, and a former cruiserweight champion on top of it all. So if you ask me, WWE should have hooked the boy Jamie Noble up with some royalties from their most beloved game franchise, and included him into Smackdown vs. Raw 2009. Number 5. Vladimir Kozlov. Vladimir Kozlov made his first appearance on TV over a year before his in-ring debut. Most fans watching weekly programming in 2006 could recall his double E promos, and while it was clear that Kozlov was not a natural on the mic, you could tell that WWE had big plans for him. After much anticipation, Kozlov finally had his first televised match on the April 4th edition of Smackdown. This would be the start of an undefeated streak that saw him tear through local talents, eventually demolishing mid-card acts, setting him up for a position in the world title picture. He would compete for the WWE Championship at Survivor Series against Edge and Triple H, which was the first pay-per-view show following the game's release. He would even gain a clean pinfall victory over The Undertaker in early 2009. Kozlov did come into the WWE after WrestleMania 24, however he arrived just a week later. And given superstars in the past like Umaga and the Great Khali have been in similar situations and still made it in, Kozlov should have received the nod. Besides, his entrance was literally blank, void of any Titantron or entrance music for the first 3 months of his career. The game developers could have utilized this fact to expedite the process of getting him into the game. I am partially joking here, but I do think Kozlov should have been included into this game, given the high hopes WWE had for him and the immediate impact he made onto the landscape of Smackdown. And just because I always get a kick out of this, here's a picture of him after the WWE. Crazy. The DLC had finally made its way into the WWE games, which would change not just wrestling games, but the entire gaming community would be affected by this new implementation. Purchasable DLC packs definitely provided some positives in wrestling games as we were able to get some new characters, gimmicks, or even attires. Although, I genuinely believe it has become a large factor in why major titles no longer have the same charm to them, as they've become subject to massive paywalls, keeping content that should be standard away from players. That's an entirely different rabbit hole that I'm not about to go down here, but for the sake of this game, DLC was a positive. And because of the DLC, this game featured an extra 9 superstars that were not a part of the initial roster, like Evan Bourne, Super Crazy, Charlie Haas, and Ted DiBiase Jr. Because of this, there really aren't many wrestlers this roster is missing. While it can seem bare because of the lack of legends, it really just boils down to the roster being in transition and not having the strongest mid and undercard. This caused this game's roster to suffer, and the lack of legends caused it to suffer even greater. Though if there was a DLC pack that included these superstars we mentioned here today, maybe it could have provided a little bit more replayability to a game that had very little. But that's all I've got for you here today. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.